Hello.
Good morning. How's it going?
Hi there. Great. Actually, everything's fine.
Oh, yeah, good, good. Yes, there's uh, having a little trouble with my camera,
I can see
so
that you're not mo your mouth isn't moving.
my mouth is not moving. That is
No,
that
I
is
understand. It's okay. Take your time.
no problem, no problem. And if it's audio only, we should still be okay.
Yeah. I think probably Richard will show up eventually.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I called my dentist to s- I said the not to change it from the 9th, and they had an appointment that day.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, so I went that day, and since then I've gone back and gotten a cap and all kinds of exciting things. It's like ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, it's all
All
good. So
right.
I'll be here next week.
Great, great.
Delia will be someplace
Yes, I think
at the dentist.
Gillia's.
She'll be at the dentist, right?
Yeah, all right. I mean, well, what is it about the dentist in this time? I thought that all.
I don't know. We love our dentist here, though. I got to tell you, the one thing we were really concerned about when we moved here was having to get all new doctors, and
Mm.
we love our doctors here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we really do. And our dentist is fantastic. Not cheap, but fantastic. So it's all good.
I thought that all dental appointments had to be at 2:30,
Why?
like tooth hurting,
Oh, ha ha.
2:30. Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
it,
okay, I
it
get it. I get it. This is
it's a
yes.
it's an
As I said,
it's
that's
an
what
old
we.
joke.
It, I never heard that before, but we call that in my family doing an Uncle Irving. Like my cousin Evie's, may she rest in peace. Her husband, her boyfriend at the time, went to Uncle Irving and asked for Evie's hand in marriage, and Uncle Irving reportedly said, "Well, sure you can have her hand, but what's wrong with the rest of her?"
There you go.
You
There you
know?
go.
Yeah.
That was
Anyway,
well, yeah, that I think that was a joke from the movie Arthur, where it's where a woman says to Arthur, "Arthur, take my hand,"
take my hand, right?
and he says, "But that would leave you with one," and so
Yes, we used to own that movie in our store, right? It was one of our original movies, I think.
there you
The original 192.
go.
Maybe we ended up with like 15,000, but
Gotcha, gotcha. All right, well, good. Well, I mean, look, we can, I mean, we could do a little studying, and
all
we'll
right.
see where it takes us. Even if we're doing it for just a little bit, I think it's all good.
Okay. Okie dokie.
All right. So here we are.
And Richard may show up. Who knows?
Yeah, there you go. So, all right.
At some point, I might have to. Frank Floyd is in my house doing some electrical work,
Okay.
and I don't think he'll be near this room. But if it gets noisy, I'll just mute myself.
Okay. No worries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I
We do a lot of that in my house. I
there you go.
mean, not getting drunk, but drinking.
Okay. All right. Well, this will be exciting then.
Mhm.
So, okay. What if you had been drinking and it's time to pray or
Okay.
what have you? All right. So, if one drank as much as a reveat of wine, now what's a reveat? You might know from like reveille
Review.
is
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like four, right?
Right.
I would
Yeah.
say like
Okay.
one fourth
Understood.
of a I would imagine it's like one fourth of a cup of wine.
It's not a lot.
Not much, right? I mean, it's more than the little shot glass, the
Depends on
size
how
that we
big the
usually
cup
give.
is. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Um. So if one and maybe I'm getting the actual amount wrong, but it could be interesting. One may not pray the Amidah until the effect of one's wine passes.
Okay.
So now I don't know enough about. Look, I uh, in terms of my infrequency of drinking, I would say I do that. Okay, I mean, once in a blue moon, maybe too
Mm,
frequently. I mean, like I just don't drink much. I mean, and no
okay.
issues with those who want to like enjoy a drink. It's fine. It's just something that I don't do very much. So I don't know, and I do know enough to know that there's that obviously the same amount of alcohol consumed by different people will have a different effect depending on the person's
That is very, very true.
physical makeup.
Very true.
So yeah, so it's so I mean maybe there's an understanding here that it would be one thing to say, all right, if you have this much wine, you have to wait half an hour, you have to wait an hour, you have to wait 3 hours. I mean, whatever the amount would be. Um, I do know that from I mean, my in terms of my infrequency of drinking, I mean, I've had, like it's like I'll have like one of those like a cider, like an apple cider type drink, right? I'll have like a can of that, which I've been told is similar alcohol content to one beer. Um, and I certainly, I certainly don't get drunk from it, but I am a little, I guess woozy or just not quite on my A game. So I guess,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, because it's so infrequent for me. I mean, like I certainly haven't learned how to hold my alcohol or whatever the phrasing is.
Hold
So
your liquor. Yeah, don't worry about it.
yeah,
Not me.
yeah. So, I mean, but for other people, having that much it would be, would barely make an imprint. So,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
Right.
So it depends on the person, right?
Hmm.
If one drank more than a reveat, if one is able to speak as before a king, if one prayed, one's prayer is considered a prayer. In other words, like if you had more
Right.
than that, if you can still speak properly,
If you're not slurring. Yeah. Okay.
right, then it's like, all right, then fine. If one is unable to speak as before a king, if one prayed, one's prayer is an abomination, and one is required to go back and pray again when the effect of one's wine passes from one. Which I mean, hopefully I'm not sounding too puritanical in saying this, but I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you're gonna, I mean, prayer is considered a sacred activity, right? And if you're uh, gonna be, I mean, whether it's slurring your words or just not having your wits about you, then yeah, yeah. I mean, pray when
Is that a
you're.
big problem? I mean,
I I have not seen it be a problem in
I don't
my,
mean current day. I mean, back when this was all, I mean, were people getting drunk? I mean,
I mean,
seems a little odd.
it does. It does. Now, granted, I mean, again, I this is where some of my, personal ignorance comes from or will shine through. Uh, I do know of, I've heard of people drinking alcohol because partially because there is a mistrust in the cleanliness of the water supply.
That's true. I've been places where we drank a lot of beer because we couldn't drink the water.
Right.
But we don't get drunk from drinking a glass of beer. So
No,
yeah.
fair. Yeah. So fair enough. So, I mean, so in other words, like, is there yeah, I mean, so is that an issue? Um, I don't really know. Um, so, okay.
Hmm. All right. Can't pray if you're
Um,
drunk. All right.
Yeah, and look, I mean, were there issues with, were people having drinking problems? I mean, look, we like to um look, there is a common misconception that Jews don't have drinking problems. And
Yeah,
that's
my
and
mother
that's
told me that. She was wrong.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's not true, right? I mean, that's there are plenty
Although
who
I
do.
think there is a certain genetic disposition in certain oh, there's Will, in certain populations, possibly, on the basis of my personal experience.
Could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that there could be some of that. I just I do know that there growing up in Denver and going to a Jewish day school, I remember there being a couple of occasions where we had guest speakers who worked with a um so there was actually if you know the name of Twersky,
Yeah.
right, so the Twersky family had a number of rabbis, and it might still have rabbis.
Right.
And I think it was Abraham Twersky, and then also a um, one of his family members, a Rabbi Mordechai Twersky, who was in Denver when I was growing up, and they they there were a number of them who all specialized in working with addicts, with substance abuse
Oh,
addicts.
okay.
And I remember Rabbi Mordechai Twersky coming to my school, and I remember him being a very sweet man, and he was just talking to us about the importance of choices and never stop making choices. In other words, like, um, just sort of, encouraging us to, even if we get into, if we delve into something that isn't in our best interest in terms of our health, whether that's alcohol or something else or drugs, that
Mm.
keep you can always choose. You can always choose to go down a different path, and with a recognition that sometimes the farther you go down a certain path, the harder sometimes it
Harder it
is
is
to
to come
make
back.
choices. But anyway, I mean, nobody he was saying it with true compassion and with true
Yeah.
understanding that it is a struggle.
Actually, this is a little tangent here, but this thing about presenting yourself before the king,
Yeah,
God is the king. I heard, I don't know if it's true. You know how the Hasids will wear, even in Israel, where it's like really hot, the black coat and the hat and the whole thing,
yeah.
and that was the attire you wore to present yourself before a human king back like in the 18th century, and somehow the custom never changed. So
Right.
like they dressed that way because that was the way you dressed to present yourself before like a human monarch. So of course you should dress that way to present yourself before God.
Right.
And that somehow it never evolved past that. And that's why they sweat a lot in Israel because it's hot.
Well, I mean, look, yeah, if you wear, I mean, if you're wearing those, those, especially those layers,
Yeah, but I mean the
uh,
fact that that's why they still wear them,
sure, sure. And,
even though it makes no sense in the heat.
yeah, yeah. And there's and look, and there's a fair, one of the ongoing challenges of, the, or just an understanding, different, movements of Judaism
Mhm.
is, or what, or well, or I guess let me just put it this way. The idea of the conservative movement is, part of it is to always embrace um, uh, not only the possibility of periodic change, but of the inevitability of periodic change.
Mhm.
And there are critiques of certain groups that um, won't accept any any kind of changes to Jewish practice past about the 18th century. Um, this idea that there are certain groups that essentially once you get past something called the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah is perhaps the most famous commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. And it is, like an outstanding, like very thorough commentary. And that there are numerous communities where if it's any time after the Mishnah Berurah, they don't accept it as a legitimate source for Jewish law. And so the critique, which I think is a fair critique, is that wait a second, you were okay with changes that were made to Jewish law when you go from the Torah to the Talmud to the different law codes, the Shulchan Aruch, and then to the Mishnah Berurah. But after the Mishnah Berurah, there's that it's impossible to change anything, right? That's a which I think is a reasonable critique. It's like, all right, so you embrace the possibility of evolution in Jewish law until you don't.
And I think some things were changing before the Holocaust. Maybe not in Hasidism, whatever the word is, in that movement. But
Right.
in Orthodoxy, for example, in Budapest,
Mm,
in that huge synagogue, the men and women all sat on the same floor, on the same level. There was no more mechitza. They
mm,
sat on separate sides, but they were all. It was starting to evolve, and then the Holocaust happened, and everything froze.
mm,
And
But it seemed
I don't
like
know.
if you're going to do something, pick a wardrobe, particularly in Israel, you'd go back to when we were wearing robes or whatever you call them, the same way the Arabs who were in the desert do. Because my understanding, I don't know how much they got under it, but because of the layers of that stuff, it's a lot cooler than if you're just wearing a t-shirt and a pair of jeans or something. But they picked something from the Middle Ages. Why the Middle Ages?
I mean, I think sometimes we underestimate the impact that style has on these sorts of decisions, right? I mean, it's one thing I remember was absolutely hilarious. Was I think it was this book sold in Israel that has like the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah, which is a from the year, which was compiled from teachings from approximately the year 1 to 200 of the Common Era, approximately. Um, and all right, well, what were people wearing at that time? Well, it was probably togas. I mean, it was probably, it were the sorts of things that you wore during the Roman Empire, right? But in this edition of the Mishnah, when they were depicting everybody, they were depicting everyone wearing what Hasids wear, which was not in fashion until, much, much later. So it was just this funny anachronistic drawing. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. So all right, so uh all right, so the idea is that all right, if you've had uh too much to drink to be able to so much, enough alcohol in which you could not properly speak before a monarch, then you have to wait until you're sober enough to do so, right? And then what it says here, even if the time of prayer passed, in other words, if it's let's say you're doing, it's time to say evening prayers and you've had too much to drink to be able to properly say the prayers, but the effects don't wear off until, let's say, you've slept it off or whatever it is, and now it's morning, right? So in other words, you've missed the opportunity to go back and recite the prayers at a different time. One should make up for it in the prayer that follows it, in accordance with the law of one who unintentionally transgresses, which I do think is an important distinction to make. They're not trying to say, um, how, like, oh, you drank alcohol, that's an evil thing, right? They're not saying that drinking is an evil thing, but what they're saying is that, uh, like, in other words, like, you're not. There's this idea that by having alcohol, you're not entirely in, let's say, depending on how much you've drank, you're not necessarily, um, you're not trying to be disrespectful when you're praying. If you are under the influence of alcohol, you're not trying to. Um, so it's considered an unintentional transgression. Um, okay, uh, so then we have the gloss here. And the law of the recitation of the Shema is the same as the law of the Amidah prayer, but regarding other blessings, one may say them even though he is drunk, which does kind of surprise me. Meaning, if you are saying the Amidah or if you're saying the Shema when you're, or the blessings, immediately surrounding the Shema, if you are doing them while under the influence, that's not okay. But other prayers, it's not an issue, according to this teaching, which is, I'm somewhat surprised. I guess the one takeaway I might offer is that, well, you know, maybe this is just one of those ways in which the importance of the Shema and the Amidah, firmly outweighs the importance of other prayers. Still, it's surprising.
Little inconsistent, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, okay. Okay, so that's the first teaching here. Traveling a meal and any amount of sleep weaken the effect of the wine. So I think by traveling a meal, I think we're speaking of a particular distance. Um, so in other words, like, I guess that maybe there's this idea that you can walk it off or sleep it off, or, or at least some of it.
Well, they're saying that traveling will increase the effects of the wine.
I mean,
And
the text here
sleeping,
says,
that sleeping will increase the intoxication, which is a little bit weird.
no, it says weaken the effect of the wine.
It says certainly sleep will increase his intoxication.
Okay. Oh, I hadn't gotten to that sentence yet. Sorry. Okay.
That's all right.
Let's take a look. And this is in the case when one drank a revi'it. But if he drank
Ah,
more than that,
okay.
then certainly sleep will increase his intoxication and traveling will agitate him. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, okay.
That's
Now,
just very weird. Yeah, okay.
yeah, this is I guess the one thing I should say is that in general, I mean, this does reflect the scientific knowledge of that time, which of course is not as advanced as what we have now.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, that's interesting. Um,
It's strange. Yeah.
I mean, okay.
Yeah.
And this is if he traveled by foot, but if he is riding, certainly the travel will weaken the effect of the wine. Okay, I don't know why this is. I don't know
I
why.
don't
No,
know.
no,
That's probably something to do with the heat. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know why this would be. Okay, okay. Now, anyone who is intoxicated, it's sufficient for one to go according to what one feels in one's being, whether one has weakened one's wine, metabolized one's wine or not. Okay, obviously this is not the most elegant translation. Um, I think Lafisha Margish Benafsho Shifigina. Like in other words, like uh, I think it's sort of like what we've been saying that um like only you can be the one who really knows whether you're completely sober or not, or at least sober enough to say the prayers, right? I think that's what it's trying to say. The gloss says, and therefore we are not careful, we're not, strict with regards to our wines which are not strong, that people may pray even though they have drunk revit or more, right? So in other words, like uh, I guess what they're saying is that different kinds of wine, depending on how depending on their ingredients,
Alcohol content. Yeah.
yeah, might not some are going to be less strong than others, and certainly all the more so if they are praying out of a prayer book in one hand, in that we are not concerned for slight intoxication, as was mentioned above. Um, I think this last part is to say that if you have a prayer book, in other words, if you're following the words as opposed to relying on your own memorization, then the thought is that the odds are better that you're going to be able to better remember your the words of the prayers, as opposed to just um relying on your own memory, and then kind of goofing with your sort of goofing with your with the words themselves. Um, okay, so this is, I mean, this part's been interesting. I mean, again, I think this shows a certain level of insight regarding um, alcohol consumption, but I think their scientific knowledge is certainly incomplete. Uh, but the overall idea is that, yeah, prayer is important enough that you should be of sound mind when engaging in it. I think that's fair to say. Um, okay. So I think that's all they have to say about this, because now we're on a different topic. It says the prayer, meaning the Amidah of a festival, needs to be organized. And so the Hebrew is sarich leseder. In other words, like you need to make sure that it's in a proper order. What does that mean? Regarding prayers, specifically the Amidah of the festivals and of the new month, one needs to organize one's prayer before one prays so that it will be fluent on his tongue. I think what we're saying here is that now, obviously, this is much easier to do when you're using a prayer book and you have, directions in the prayer book, as most prayer books have, in which it says, okay, on this, on for this special day, turn to this page to add the extra paragraph, or look below in order to look below where it says add this extra sentence or this extra passage. Um, and you should be able to, you should have an idea of what you're going to say and where you're going to say it so that you're not spending too much time hesitating before saying those prayers. So I think, at least off the top of my head, I would say that this is a justification for whoever is announcing pages, be it the rabbi or somebody else, to say, all right, in this part of the Amidah or in this particular prayer, please don't forget to include this paragraph or that sentence or what have you, so that people could be like, oh, yeah. And now, that's not to say that people won't still have their minds wander here and there and accidentally forget to include something or to exclude something. I think that's kind of inevitable that it'll happen from time to time. But to get a reminder or to remind oneself prior to praying is certainly advisable. The gloss here is that there are those who say that this is specifically when we pray by heart. But when we are praying from within a prayer book, it is permitted to pray without organizing, since one sees what one is praying, and that is what we practice. Meaning, it's like, all right, well, if you're following a prayer book, then it should be really easy to, remember what passages to say, because it says so right there what to do. I have to admit, though, there are still times where even when it says it right in front of my face, I'm still not remembering it to do it. I don't know about you, but sometimes, short of having a neon sign flashing it in front of me, sometimes I just rely on, my typical patterns and forget to make changes for a special day. Does that ever happen to you?
It makes sense, yes. It's like muscle memory, except it's your memory.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
It always happens. I mean, I let me see. So a time where this is really a challenge, at least for me, is during the high holidays. If you
Mm,
look, or like
yes.
during the high holidays, and especially during the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So, um, on the Shabbat in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that's known as Shabbat Shuvah.
Uh-huh.
On Shabbat Shuvah this year, I was back in Charleston, and I was asked to lead one of the services at the synagogue where I pray in Charleston. I was asked to lead one of the services, and so I did. But what I uh, but and bef- so I was asked to do the Shacharit service.
Mhm.
The Shacharit service on Shabbat Shuvah has um I think it's like 7 or 8 different places where we're singing something different than on a normal Shabbat, because of things that we add due to the being in the high holiday period. A notable way is we say, in the Kaddish, we say the word La'ela twice instead of once.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We do that during those 10 days.
I'm
Um,
wondering why. I mean,
why?
because my father died right around there, so I do say Kaddish then, and I was kind of wondering why that gets repeated.
La'ela,
It
La'ela.
does. Okay.
The idea is like, so the root of that word, Ayin Lamed Hey, means to go up or to rise up. And the idea is that during, at least an interpretation that I've read, is that during the high holidays, um, we are trying, uh, especially for our prayers to rise up toward the heaven. That's an interpretation that I've read. Um, eh, so so that's one thing we add. Another thing that we do is that during those 10 days, when we get to the prayer, Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh, blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. During the 10 days, we say Hamelech hakadosh, the holy sovereign, because um, the idea of God's sovereignty, of saying Hamelech, is a very big verbal theme during those 10 days. We are, the acknowledgement of God as ruler of the universe, and to then note the sovereignty of God so that we are better able to say to God, okay, yes, you are the sovereign, and we recognize that, and therefore we are entreating the sovereign to listen to our prayers. So anyway, I'm there are all these changes that we do, and so I went through a Siddur, and before Shabbat, and I made a bunch of little, and I had bunch of little sticky notes to remind myself to make all the changes, because it's just, it's really easy to forget, when you're supposed to say something, because again, you're just sort of going on autopilot sometimes. Um, and that's even when it's in front of you. So, um, so this is just a reminder that it's it's not so unusual to have these forgetful moments, even when we are reading through it. We just, typically just kind of go according to our habits. Um, okay, I think we have time to at least delve into this. All right, this next part here, which is that one must direct one's intention for all the blessings that one can pray in any language. Okay. One who prays the Amidah needs to direct one's intention for all the blessings. But if one is not able to direct one's intention during all of them, one should at least concentrate on the blessing of the forefathers, the first blessing of the Amidah. And the forefathers and the foremothers, I would, in the way we do it today at our synagogue. So, in other words, at least up to this point, that um, if you're not in, your highest level of concentration, at least you got to focus on the beginning of the Amidah. You at least have to start strong. Then, if one didn't direct one's intention while saying the blessing, this initial blessing, even if one directed one's intention for the rest of the blessing, one needs to return to the beginning of the Amidah and pray. So it's important to start with the right intention, even if one kind of trails off a little bit later. At least you've started out strong, as opposed to kind of goofing your way through the first part of it and then only later having you know, your even later being attentive. It's more important that you start strong than starting weakly and then finishing strong. I guess is what they're saying. Um, and I think that's a very human, that is a very human thing that we start off really concentrating, and then as we kind of, as we get a little, as we might get distracted, as we maybe grow a little weary, depending on how we're feeling at that moment. Um, if we're trailing off, it's like that's normal sometimes, but you got to start out on the right foot. So then this gloss is saying, nowadays we do not return to repeat the prayer when it is due to a lack of intention, because there's a fair chance, even in the repeating of the Amidah, it is likely that one will not direct one's intention again. If so, why should one return? So this argument is saying that maybe that's a nice thought, that okay, well, if we're not going to if we're not paying good enough attention at the beginning, we need to go back and say it again. And they're saying, well, what's to say that you're gonna be able to pay better attention the second time around? Which is a little cynical. Um, I might suggest that it might make more sense to say something like, all right, if you're not in the right frame of mind for prayer, that maybe it's better to, take a little break, come back refreshed and ready to pray sincerely, as opposed to saying, as opposed to immediately trying to start again. I do remember this from day school, times when, or even on a USY trip or something like that, where, for instance, it would be like, whether it would be like a service, or even where we were saying Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meals, if people were, not paying attention, if they were talking or goofing off or whatever it is, that our, our leaders, our either our teachers or our counselors or whoever it was, would sometimes just stop us in the middle and say, okay, we're going to start over again, because there's been too much talking. There's been too much, goofing around. And honestly, that would usually make us just frustrated that we had to, go and do it again. So I guess it's understandable why they would try to do that, but it wasn't a very effective strategy. Um, okay, so this next part here. One should not only pray in one's heart, but one must actually enunciate the words with one's lips and let them be heard in a whisper tone by one's own ears. So, in other words, you should be able to hear yourself whisper the words, but that shouldn't be audible to somebody near you, right? However, one should not let one's voice be heard fully during the silent rendition of the Amidah. However, if one is unable to direct one's intention to the Amidah while in a whispering tone, one is allowed to raise one's voice. So, if whispering isn't, kind of getting you to really focus, then you can be a little louder, I guess. But this is only when one is praying privately. But if one is praying with the congregation, it is forbidden, as this is a nuisance for the congregation. And then the gloss says, if one is letting one's voice be heard in one's home when praying, so that the members of one's household will learn from one, it is permitted, right? So if you're doing it for the sake of teaching somebody else within your own home, that's okay. But when you're trying to do it in synagogue, it can be kind of annoying. And by the way, there are times where in synagogue, uh, like during the silent portion of prayer, I don't really detect this much at Heskamuna, but I would say that there have definitely been times where mm, I will, let me try to put this as gently as I can. Um, there were times when I was at the seminary when there would be people at prayer services who would like to be very audible during their during the individual praying time because now whether they were doing it because they were feeling uh, particularly passionate about it, or whether they were kind of showing off to show everybody how pious they were, hard to know. But I think that is I do feel that sometimes that is an issue where people they like saying it out loud because they kind of like to show how uh, show how well they know it, put it that way. Now, some say apparently that on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it is permitted to let one's voice be heard in one's prayer, even in public. And the gloss here is that this is what we practice. All right. Apparently, a lot of people would do this. However, people must be careful not to raise their voice too much. Okay. So don't overdo it. But I guess the sense is that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I mean, these are intense. I mean, they're intense times, and they are deserving of, I guess, more intense, um, intense methods of praying. Now, this is the part I really wanted to get to. One may pray in any language one desires, and this applies when one is praying together with a congregation. But when one is praying alone, one should only pray in the holy language, so, only in Hebrew. And some say that this requirement to only pray in Hebrew only applies when one is asking for one's own personal needs. For example, one who has prayed for someone who is ill or for some affliction in one's household. However, when reciting the regular liturgy established for the congregation, even an individual may recite it in any language. And some say that even an individual requesting his own personal needs may request them in any language one wishes, except for in the Aramaic language. I tend to
Makes no
rely.
sense.
Well, it makes no
But
sense.
God doesn't understand the other languages? I mean, like what?
Yeah, no. No, I tend to. I have them. I take a more liberal mindset when it comes to this. Look, is there value in praying in Hebrew? Absolutely. And I do like that, the prayer services at Heskamona and are for the most part recited in Hebrew, because I think that is, it connects us to it connects us to our tradition, to our heritage, and and it's a language that binds all Jews. But yeah, if you're having a hard time, but when in doubt, or when you're having a difficult if you're having difficulty reading the Hebrew, or you just want to deal with what you understand, absolutely go to a language that you understand. Um, Now, I imagine that this last part where they say, you know, say it in any language one wishes except for Aramaic. I don't know when people stopped saying, like stopped speaking Aramaic as sort of a day-to-day language.
Was that like ghetto? Was it considered kind of like a ghetto language?
I mean, it did.
Like you wouldn't pray any Ebonics? I mean, I don't know. Like,
No, no, no. It's not so much that. I think it's more that it's sort of a language that had. I mean, look, I don't know when Aramaic stopped being a day-to-day language, but I'm guessing it was a while ago. So, in other words, like you can pray in any language, but except for the prayers that are established in Aramaic, like all the Kadishes. The Kadishes are all Aramaic. They're not actually Hebrew. I mean, they're with Hebrew characters, but they're actually Aramaic. But in other words, don't go. It's sort of like, uh, don't go to a language that people don't speak anymore. In other words, if you speak English and you want to say it in English, okay. If you speak French and you want to say it in French, okay. But to then say, oh, well, I'm going to do it in this old language that people don't speak anymore, don't do that. Right? It'd be like, I mean, this isn't an exact parallel, but it's like, all right, well, any language is okay. So I'm going to say it in Pig Latin. Or,
it's
if
not
you're a
really
star,
the same thing because that was never actually a spoken language.
right? No,
Not
true.
really. That was
That's true.
it was a
Although,
game, you know?
yeah, although there was one time, I mean, because and you'll understand it's because of the spirit of that holiday, but there was one time
Oral.
on Purim, yeah, there's one time on Purim where I led a responsive English reading, and I did my part in Pig Latin just to be
Oh my God. Yeah, okay.
just to be totally goofy. Um,
Oh wait, it's just when you did the Beatles tunes
yeah, yeah,
and then the next day you did Super Mario Brothers or something, Mario
I
Brothers.
I tried to, yeah.
They were like now the Beatles, I knew exactly where I could Mario, I think they were like this is not a criticism, it was just kind of funny. There were like two people there who were young enough to know what that was to like know that tune. Like
Yeah,
Bill Thompson was one of them. It was hilarious.
yeah,
My kids
yeah.
used to play it because my older son is a couple years younger than you, around the same age. It's just it was funny. That's all.
Sure, sure. No, that one didn't work as well as I hoped
It, it,
because
it,
I kept on confusing which, like, it's like I was started with Super Mario 1, and then I sort of
yeah, no,
fell
yeah, like I
into.
said, I thought it was hilarious, and I got to give you credit for trying. It was just, yeah, it's not quite as easy as the Beatles.
Right.
Na 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 na, anyway,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, 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 absolutely. And people have done it to, like, like TV themes. Like I've seen people do it, like, they did the Flintstones, and they did the
Ah, the
Jetsons, and they
Flintstones. Yeah,
did.
see, those I would recognize.
Right, right.
If I'm old.
Exactly. Like if I wanted to, it's like if I want to do something contemporary, I mean, I guess I could do that. I guess if I were fluent enough in this, I could try to to Taylor Swift
Oh,
song
please
melodies.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm not. I mean, I'm
I
not.
wouldn't recognize those myself. So that's, I mean, consider the
Yeah,
age of the congregation, you know?
yeah, exactly. No, I'm not gonna. I mean, look,
Yeah. The
I have nothing.
Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah, Simon and Garfunkel, you could do show tunes, certain show tunes, I
That's
could
very
definitely do that.
true. Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. But look, and I have nothing against Taylor Swift. I mean, but I just couldn't. I mean, I just don't. I'm not familiar enough with her canon
Okay.
to do it. So okay, all right. Well, I think look, I think I appreciate it. And thanks for your patience with my camera being all messed up. But we'll pick up next week.
Okay.
All right. Have a good day,
Yeah.
everybody.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, take care.